Welcome to the panel on paradigm shift, role of technology in strengthening the universities of the future. We have a very distinguished panel today to have this conversation with us. Technology, as you know, is a powerful tool that can support and transform education in many ways, including teaching, research, writing, collaboration, and administration. It has facilitated many opportunities for collaboration among many various actors across the world and has facilitated many conversations, including the one that we're having today. This session will highlight from very rich perspectives of our panelists, given their years of experience in managing universities and creating research and writing opportunities for millions of faculty members and students around the world. The session will highlight how technologies can revolutionize national and global education, research, and opportunities, transform the governance of an institution to create levels of efficiency and transparency. And we also hope to discuss the limitations of technology. We have with us, I'm going to just introduce four of our distinguished panelists. None of them need any introduction, but briefly, may I just start with our first panelist, Professor Mike Mannion. Professor Mike Mannion is the Interim Vice Principal for Global Engagement and President of GCNYC and former Dean of the School of Computing, Engineering, and Built Environment. He is also a professor in the Department of Computing. He joined Glasgow Caledonian University in 2000 as head of the Department of Computing and subsequently became the Dean of the School of Computing and Mathematical Sciences in 2002, and then the Dean of School of Engineering and Computing in 2007 and 2008. Next, we have with us Professor David Kennedy. Professor David Kennedy is the Dean of Digital Education at Newcastle University. In his role, he provides strategic direction and oversight of online and campus-based digital education across Newcastle University. He took up his role at the end of 2022, having previously been the Deputy Dean for Education in the Faculty of Medical Sciences and Deputy Head of the School of Medicine at Newcastle University. Our next guest is Professor Suparto. Professor Suparto is a highly experienced educator from University of Muhammadiyah, Malang, Indonesia. He has held various roles at the University of including lecturer, assistant rector for international accreditation, and assistant rector for collaboration. Our next guest is Professor Dr. Mayank Dhaundiyal. He's the Dean of Jindal Global Business School at the OP Jindal Global University. In his career spanning more than 15 years, he has worked with premier universities in India, including Shiv Nadir and Bennett University, and international universities such as Technological University, Dublin, Ireland. Welcome to this conversation today. What we're going to do is we're going to do two sets of rounds of conversation and then have Q&A from the audience. My first question is directed to all of you, and I would invite initial comments from all the panelists on the two questions, and then I'll have specific questions for each one of you in our second round. So my first question is, what technological innovations have you witnessed at your university and in your country for continuing research work? What has been the impact of these innovations? How has technology helped streamline the governance and administrative process of an institution? What are some of the key innovations that have helped improve administrative efficiency and effectiveness in the future? May I please invite comments first from Professor Mike?
Thanks very much, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody, wherever you are. So there's quite a lot of questions in that one, actually, Dipika, and I think I'll just kind of roll back a little bit from that and start by, I suppose, drawing attention, for me anyway. I mean, universities have always drawn upon technology to advance their futures. There's quite a significant difference in the way they go about their business today than there was, say, even 20 years ago. I suppose my interest looking ahead is having got a PhD in AI and starting to see its impact along with data science and on higher ed. I remember when I did my PhD, one of the boys I was studying with at the time, he was all into natural language processing. And I might say that was 40 years ago, and here we are. It's taken 40 years to get to ChatGPT. So it's a bit of a slow process in some way. You know, from the lab bench out into the commercial marketplace can sometimes take a long time, but when it does, it has a significant impact. I mean, just to make the point, data science is a different thing from AI, very much about capture, storage, security, preparation, cleansing, analysis, presentation, and data's changing all the time: volume, velocity, volatility, value. And AI is more about that ability of a machine to perform cognitive functions, perceiving, reasoning, learning, interacting. So when they come together, it can be a very powerful influence. I guess just to be particular about research, I think what struck me in the last few years is the increase in number of open data movements that have emerged, whether that is in higher ed, which is happening, but more in perhaps in we're starting to see it in open government. I know the Indian government has its own open data initiative, and there are kind of variations on that, which I think is very healthy for society at large. And I know one alternative is a kind of a data trust, where you have the stewarding of decisions is the responsibility of an independent group of trustees, rather than left to the auspices of the organization itself. So I'd say that's making a big difference to research. I think what we'll also see is the role of digital twins, not only for helping an organization itself to understand the systems it's got, but as a mechanism for sharing between different partners, whether that is in higher education or whether it's in the commercial sector. I think they're very powerful. It's a very powerful tool for helping to advance knowledge more generally. So I'll stop there and allow someone else to come in.
Thank you so much, Professor Mike. May I invite Professor Kennedy for your initial comments?
Yes, thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And yeah, I'll just follow up a little bit around the use of technology in governance and administration, and perhaps the effectiveness, efficiency of that. And I would just like to start by saying sometimes we're driven by technology and we change to that. And that doesn't necessarily make things easier for us or more effective or more efficient. It just adds something else to do. Or we can go with technology to meet a need, a pedagogical function, whatever it might be. And that might have some kind of efficiency or effectiveness savings for us. So just thinking about a couple of examples there from my own experience in Newcastle. When we're in the process of moving to digital exams, we've still got some on campus. And one of the selling points for that was it would be an efficiency saving. We wouldn't have to do as much. And I think there are some real benefits after the assessment itself. It's much quicker to process the data. The turnaround time for getting students the results and feedback is much quicker. Administratively, that's a lot simpler. But in the setup, it does take a little bit longer, and you need the technological support for when things go wrong during the assessment. So it's kind of shifted the effort, if you like, to pre-exam rather than post-exam. But some things are much better with technology. So again, a couple of examples. I'm based in the medical school here in Newcastle for half my time, and we've got a branch campus in Malaysia, in Johor Bahru. And pre-pandemic, we have very frequent meetings, at least every week. We used video conferencing with 2 boardrooms. We've got the same curriculum, same assessment, so we need to meet regularly to ensure we've got a good governance of our programs. And that never really worked well in a video conferencing setup. Visually, you couldn't really see everyone. You saw 2 rooms. Audio wasn't always brilliant, depending on where you sat in the room. And it was more difficult to chair. But actually, technologies like Zoom, like we're doing today, or Teams, kind of leveled that playing field. Everyone was visible, the audio was better, it was easier to chair across two boardrooms. So that kind of worked really well. You did lose some of the networking, in room just before or after the meeting, but for the meeting itself, it worked much better. And also just in terms of travel, we had staff traveling from around a regional medical school from the north of England, and they didn't have to travel for those meetings. That also translates to student support and student guidance. A regional medical school, we would often call a meeting with our students for pastoral academic needs. They would travel maybe, an hour and a half to come for that meeting, then an hour and a half back for the placement. We now do many of those on Zoom or Teams from the hospital in which they're based. So it saves a lot of time, effort, and can be quite effective. And the other kind of area that I think we have seen efficiencies and some quite good outcomes is around databases and management of data. So just one simple example, when I started in the medical school here, attendance registers were bits of paper that were sent around the class, all 300, 400 students, signed them all in, then we had to gather them all up, and then someone in the office then translated that onto an Excel spreadsheet, and we got attendance list per class, and then if you had to go and have a look, you had to look at several spreadsheets. About 10 years ago, we moved to a scanner, which scanned the cards, and we passed around a little handheld device, and the students scanned the smart card. That saved a bit of time because the output was just downloaded onto the computer. But actually what made a big difference was, scanners in the classroom themselves, the students scanning as they enter. And then we have a database, and that's now searchable. You can search for a student and look at a record of attendance in the day, the week, the month. It's an awful lot easier, more effective, more efficient than when we had to look through a lot of Excel spreadsheets. But that's just some examples of where we can use technology effectively. And as Mike has just said, I think the next thing for us to think about is how we can use AI to become more effective, more efficient, particularly as student numbers grow. And certainly, in some of our institutions, the academic and administrative support is not. So we need to become more effective and efficient in that. And I think AI might have a role in there. So I'll end there for now, if that's okay.
Thank you, Professor Kennedy. Professor Suparto, may I please invite you for your initial comments?
Thank you. Well, I think our experience seems like similar between one another. The one in UK, or in India, or in Indonesia, for example. I think we have a similar experience concerning with the use of technology. But as long as my own experience concerns, I had a very special experience in 2010, 28, 29 there. At that time, I already encouraged my students to develop, because at that time I thought curriculum development. I am from School of Education, and starting from 2008 up to 2010, at the time I already assigned my students to develop teaching learning activity in 2020. The point is that when we, at that time, the point is that the teaching learning activity in 2020 must be online, must be paperless, must be application based. Fortunately or unfortunately, in quotation mark, there was a COVID-19, and all this, I think not only Indonesia, but also most of the countries did the teaching learning activity online, paperless, and by using applications. Therefore, in my own personal perception, I can say that COVID-19 actually, the blessing is that COVID-19 actually purify our civilization, because before COVID-19, people did not quite aware about digital technology. At that time, when I use online teaching, for example, by asking the student to use the technology, computer, or especially mobile phone, for example, it looks strange for some people. But because of COVID-19, we were forced to use technology. Therefore, I can say that the blessing of COVID-19 is that it can purify the civilizations in the 21st century. Now, because of COVID-19, then the teaching learning activity, the academic activity, the research activity in my university, University of Muhammadiyah Malang, Indonesia, for example, it's very common for us to use technology in teaching learning, especially in research, for example. In research, we use the technology, we use the technology starting from even data collections. Of my colleagues already use drone, for example, for mapping of certain area by using geographic information system, GIS, and they are able to analyze the data. In our faculty of agriculture, for example, they use precision farming, meaning that all the treatment given in that farming must be accurate, must be precise. When you give a fertilizer, for example, based on the data obtained from our analysis by using GIS or whatever it is, our teaching staff, our researcher is able to give the data, to give the treatment precisely. This is in terms of data collection and analysis. But it also happens when we do the collaborations and communication of the research result, for example. In Indonesia, it has been very common to use Zoom like what we are doing now, to use Google Meet, to use Microsoft Teams, to use Discord. Even for our Chinese partner, they use Ting Talk or whatever it is. We have been accustomed to this one. This happens again because of the digital technology that has very popular in Indonesia, especially in a university. Overall, in my opinion, as an initial remark about the use of technology, technology is created to assist human being to develop civilization. Although in certain part of us, some of us think that technology, digital technology, or ChatGPT, like what Mike mentioned, some of us has different ideas about this. Let's say this media. For us, it is just a media of teaching, learning in the class. But I think we have, as a teacher, as a lecturer, as a researcher, we have to have the positive idea about technology, about digital technology, about AI or whatever it is. Otherwise, we will fall behind, because if we set apart from technology, where technology will disturb education, for example, then we will not try to approach the technology. If we are not approaching technology, then we will not be able to make use. What is more important is that because teachers, because lecturers, because researchers are designed to prepare the next generations, then what we give must be the competence of the next generation. We are not, we cannot be stuck on our own competence. For example, like me, myself, I am the product of let's say 2000s. My competence was the competence of 2000. If we have to prepare the generation of 2040, then it's very far behind if we are not approaching technology. Therefore, although I am the product of 2000, for example, because I am assigned to prepare the generation of 2040, for example, then my vision must be for 2050. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Suparto. May I now invite Professor Dhaundiyal to please offer their initial comments.
Thank you very much, Professor Dipika. I'm delighted to be part of this exciting discussion with distinguished panelists. Thanks to Jindal Global Center for G20 Studies and the International Institute for Higher Education Research and Capacity Building of OP Jindal Global University for having put together this excellent virtual, World University Summit. Now, we're of course, well aware of the role that technology has played and has always played. I think it's just that it's becoming so mainstream now, and leading to major disruptions that it has come to the fore. Now, some of the changes are already happening, and I think some of them probably are going to happen in the months and years to come. So of course, technology in terms of administration and governance, it has helped us as university administrators in better coordination, in timely sort of communication. I think COVID-19 pandemic has just accelerated this trend of online teaching and using all these tools that were perhaps on the fringes earlier. So we are well adept at using Microsoft Teams and Zoom and Google Drive and Microsoft Drive for doing collaborative work. This summit, of course, is happening over the Zoom platform. And what it has done is it has blurred boundaries. It doesn't really matter where the person is participating from. So that has certainly happened. Of course, now with this online education, it has become geography agnostic. So there are faculty members, staff members, students joining from all over the world. Of course, the Microsoft Outlook and email is still, I think, at least in academia, is still the, the official communication, and there is a preference for that. But I think the world has moved on to different platforms. I think organizations are using, tools like Slack and, WhatsApp, even officially, but extensively across different organizations. So technology has been an enabler for, all this collaborative work, across different time zones. I think, that has accelerated, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. From an administration and governance point of view, I think for universities, especially for, brick and mortar universities like us, there are 2-3 aspects that I would like to, focus on in the limited time that we have. One, of course, is the, the human resources, the part of it in the strategy recruitment. And given that a lot of the content is being delivered online, what that essentially means is that universities can now hire for pretty much any part of the world. And they can record content, it's online, it's gets delivered online. So that way it's an enabler, because you're not really limited to a particular geography if it's you're looking at online content generation and delivery. So from a recruitment and retention point of view, I think that's true for the universities. That's also true for other organizations. And that's not only limited to faculty and staff, it's also about students. In fact, we do a lot of degree programs, if I talk about Jindal Global University, on online platforms like Coursera and Upgrad. And what that means is what we are experiencing is our students are coming from all over the world. In fact, we've never had students from so many different countries, joining our degree programs and taking benefit of our world-class faculty members. So I think that is something that has definitely changed in a big manner in the last 2-3 years. The other aspect I would like to focus on in the limited time that we have is that due to these AI ML models that the fellow panelists also talked about, I think there is a lot of disruption happening in terms of what amount of data the universities and other organizations, for that matter, they can collect, they can analyze in real time. ChatGPT is just one tool. I think Google released Bard, and I'm sure there's a flood of other tools coming in, right? So this is an ML model. You give data to this model and it learns, right? So you're looking at something where, for example, universities feed its data to these models, and it answers your queries in real time. Right. So essentially, university administrators, many of them not technologically very adept. But the point is that you don't need to, because you can give commands in your own language, and it processes all this data and gives you insights that you never had access to before. Now, that's game-changing. Now, that has implications at so many different levels that is, I don't even know, till what extent it will actually sort of, disrupt the industry. So that is one aspect of it. In fact, I was reading in social media this new tool on, in Microsoft Excel called Copilot. I don't know, till, what extent, it's currently usable. But essentially, you can give commands in natural language, and it can give you projections on Microsoft Excel. So you don't even need to know formulas. So, I mean, imagine the effect of that for university administrators, all that student, faculty, research, all different, so you can essentially sort of map the, project the impact of a certain variable on one of your key performance indicator as a university, and for that matter, any organization. And it'll help you project that relationship, visualize that relationship. So I think that is a major disruption when you're talking about from an administrative and governance point of view. You're looking at a situation where there's AI ML models know pretty much everything about your university. And it'll help you strategize for the next 5, 10, 15 years with real data, with real-time data. Right. And you can, being a non-tech guy also, you can be pretty much, very adept at it. I think that is, really game changing. And that has never happened before. And this is just the start. I'm sure all this Chat GPT and Bard, what's available in the public domain, I'm sure organizations, companies like Google, and Microsoft and, other tech companies, they have access to much sophisticated tools that are still not in the public domain. Right. So, I mean, it's completely, game changing.
Thank you so much, Professor Dhaundiyal, for your insights. I think there have been some very important insights that have come out from all of you. I think some of the key takeaways are the words that I would take away are words like efficiency, support to students and faculty community and administration, but also the key word also remains, which is disruptive. I mean, there is also a disruptive potential, which we have to be mindful of. And I think that came out quite well in the nuanced conversation. My next question is to Professor Mannion. And Professor Mannion, would you please suggest ways, and I mean, this question is especially for leaders of higher education, could you suggest ways in which higher education institutes can build intellectual and institutional capacities of students and faculty members in the domain of educational technology?
Well, I think it's actually quite interesting. Let's start with the staff first, because just to pick up on the last point, the increasing use of sophisticated AI tools and data analysis tools in particular is going to challenge the skill sets of the staff that we've got. And I think institutionally, we need to be thinking about helping the variety of people who will be involved either in the procurement of these sorts of tools, the initial deployment of them, and then their use. It's understanding what are the underlying assumptions, for example, which are built into the algorithms that these systems are using. What views do we have on any the ethical foundations of the processes by which data is collected and analyzed and used, the extent to which there is any self-explanation in any of these systems. So there's a kind of staff development thing, and then there's there's the systems perspective for the institution at large. Who's making those decisions? I mean, more generally, I think so the staff need to be made aware of what some of the key issues are, and then how the institution is going to try to resolve those issues at the point of actually purchase or deployment or training and usage. The more we embrace systems which make far more complex what I might call judgments rather than decisions, the more we need to be wary and take the view that these decisions are recommendations to us rather than the final decision. So there are some processes around that to make sure that that is quite clear. I think more generally from the student's point of view, I would say that there's probably a call to all degree programs to throw a spotlight on data science and AI. Now, what the scope of topics to be covered in those programs and the capability level to be discussed and exactly where in a program structure that's going to happen, I think that needs to be left to the individual program teams, because each degree discipline is starting from a different point and is actually going to end in a different point. So, but there will be opportunities for the academic community for each of those programs, I think, to kind of really think hard about how best to integrate additional knowledge about data science and AI into those degree programs, and have discussions with professional standards and regulatory bodies, with student association, with partners who are feeding into university programs such as schools or colleges, and have conversations with recipients of the graduate labor force, you know, in industry and the public and private sector. You know, what are our expectations about what different people need to know, and what skills they need to have, and I suppose have some sort of a roadmap for each program over the next, certainly for the duration of which a program is approved, which typically in the UK is about 5 years. You know, what's going to change, and how is that kind of information and knowledge going to be integrated into the program? So there's a huge staff development program, and a significant change in the curriculum for all programs, which will need to integrate data science and AI appropriately to the needs of that student community. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mannion. Just segueing from what you were saying, my next question is to Professor Kennedy. Professor Kennedy, in your view, what should be various short-term and long-term strategies for universities? For example, what type of discussion or conversations university leaders should engage in as far as the role of technology is concerned in strengthening universities?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think we've kind of touched on a few of the kind of key points already today. So certainly, you know, looking at the UK in particular, there is a financial driver as well. We can't forget that, you know, student tuition fees haven't increased, and in real terms, that means the value of that has decreased. So that drives us to want to be, or need to be, more efficient. The world is changing, as has been articulated already. You know, people are more comfortable online, and we've got to think about, you know, for traditional universities that are more campus-based, how much do we go to that blended or online model? And do we do that ourselves or with partners, as Sarah has mentioned, to support that kind of change? I do think we have to be more flexible. The way that people live and work and play is different, and people use technologies in their normal lives. We have to reflect that in our programs. We also are responsible for our graduates and the employment they're going into. So, you know, just even thinking about, you know, AI has been mentioned a few times already, in data science. That is a big thing, and it will become, I'm sure, even more significant in the workplace. And we've got a responsibility to graduate our students to be responsible and ethical in the use of that. So again, you know, some of the potential problems with AI around it, you know, its output, its potential biases and so on, we need to make sure our students are aware of that, so when they do use it, they do so responsibly. in terms of technology, and strategy, we've got to think of technology as two things. It's an enabler to do what we want to do, but technology can also drive what we do. And it's a disruptor. We keep coming back to AI, but that's just the one that's hot off the press, and ChatGPT. It's a disruptor, and then we've got to adapt quickly to that, and that's maybe a short-term strategy about how we deal with that in terms of the positive uses and also the kind of threats to things like assessments and so on that we may have. The final thing I think we've got to think about is, as we become more reliant on the use of technologies for education, for research, the threat of cyber attack. And when we're so reliant on these technologies, when they go down, it really disrupts what we do. So we've got to think about how best we protect ourselves or have contingencies in place to deal with that kind of situation. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you so much, Professor Kennedy. My next question is to Professor Suparto. In your initial comments, Professor Suparto, you were talking about COVID-19 and the sort of recognition of the role and power of technology in the classroom or education system. So given that, my next question to you is, in the absence of cross-border mobility, technology-driven virtual programs were embraced by multiple institutions. Given that this allows greater and more effective access to international experiences, what has been the role of technology in strengthening access to international opportunities for all students?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, as I said at the beginning, that in certain extent, I think I can say that there was a blessing when there was a COVID-19 in terms of digital technology, especially. Yeah, because of that event, let's say, because of COVID-19, then we are exposed with a number of technology. Not only technology as a means, as a tools, but also technology, a digital technology as a frame of mind, as a state of mind, as the way how we think, how we work, how we teach, for example. Therefore, because of COVID-19, then there was a creative idea how to develop for international activity. First is the language, for example, how to do international language learning, for example, learning English, for example, for Indonesian online. That the students were able to find out that there are a number of applications that can be used for learning English online. For example, I can mention Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, etc. Those are some of the online activities for learning English in this case, language, or especially English for us. Because in Indonesia, English is a foreign language, not a second language. But therefore, there are a number of our people in Indonesia that are not quite good in that English. But because of technology, even as long as my own experience concerns, my own son, for example, although I am a teacher of English, for example, but I can say that I never have a special time to teach my son to learn English. What my son did at the time when they were students is they just do, online games. By having online games, and fortunately, currently now, his English is much better than mine, because my English tends to be bookish, but my son's English is a real English, according to my colleagues that meet him at that time. This is learning English online. During COVID-19, we also had the experience of conducting internship online. In fact, I think most of the works can be done online, as long as our experience concerned when we have work from home, for example. All activities were done online. Maybe it was not quite optimum at the time because there was no preparation. Suddenly, there was COVID-19. Without preparation, people had to work from home. Therefore, it makes them were not able to work in a optimum level, for example, at the time. But actually, if we are able to train our teaching staff, to train our administrative staff, to train our students to work, to learn online, then we must be able to make use the capacity, the potential of online online resources here. And not only internship, our especially in our teaching learning activity during COVID-19, we developed, because of after the COVID-19 has been better, there was some student could be in campus, but most of them must be outside campus, must be done online. At that time, develop what we call polysynchronous learning method. What is meant by polysynchronous learning method here is that we try to make use 3 paths of online learning. One is on-site. Some students are on-site in class with the student, with limited student with special protocols from COVID-19, and most of them are synchronous online. So our teaching in class was broadcasted through our learning media, can be through Facebook, even Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is. So those on-site in class and those outside of the class doing synchronous activity can perform approximately the same level. They can get the information during the activity, during teaching learning activity, almost the same as the one in class and the one outside of the class. And for those, because of special reason, they were not allowed to come to the class, they were not able to join online synchronous, we have the record of the teaching learning activity. The record of the teaching learning activity here was sent to our learning management system, our LMS. So the students who were not able to join that class online and on-site can see what was going on in the class through the record of from our learning management system. Therefore, we call this one as polysynchronous learning activity. By having polysynchronous activity, we assume that all students can follow the teaching learning activity very well. The student, there will be no student fall behind of the teaching learning activities. And this kind of activities can be developed internationally. In international activity, we had the experience getting the grant from the government to have international credit transfer from our partner abroad. The student taking the credit in Indonesia about 20 credits for one semester, full semester, doing the credit online through by having the partner of our university abroad. We had the partner from Spain in Murcia. There were 2 students joining one online class for one semester. We have the partner from Hungary, from Page in Hungary, and also have the partner from Italy, from China, and from some other partners. They did it online, and those online activity, because of COVID-19, now the Indonesian government recognized this activity. Before COVID-19, there was a tendency to ban the activity, to minimize the activity. They would like to maximize the activity on site, but because of COVID-19, then the government have the regulation that online activity is also recognized the same as on-site activity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Suparto. I think we can't end this conversation without discussing the limitations of technology, especially given the global South dynamics on digital divide. So my next question is to Professor Dhaundiyal. Professor Dhaundiyal, if you could talk about a little bit about limitations that we may be facing in terms of access to technology in the higher education domain. So given the fact that there still persists a substantial section of people whose digital access is highly limited, especially in countries that are in global South, what strategies do you suggest would be helpful in addressing the digital divide?
Thank you very much, Professor Dipika. So yes, you're correct. I think, especially for a country like India, if you look at, the number of people having access to, for example, internet and the total number of internet subscribers, I think that's about, 750, 800 million, about 55, 60% of the population. Now, that compares well with the BRICS countries, from China to Brazil, Russia, from 60 to around 70, 75%. But obviously, we have a long way to go if we have to compare with, the developed countries like the US, UK, Denmark, Germany. You're talking about upwards of 90% in case of, I think, countries like Denmark, it's closer to 100% people having access to internet. So obviously, for a country like India, I think that's extremely, important to have that access. And the reasons, of course, are well known. As a country, although in terms of population size, we compare, I think we are probably already the most populous country in the world at around 1.4 billion. My sense is we have already surpassed China. Currently, given our economic, the size of the economy, around 3.5 trillion, we recently, surpassed UK as, the fifth largest economy in the world. But given the government's mandate to making it 5-10 trillion economy, of course, trend suggests that India is expected to be the third largest in nominal terms. China, of course, is around 19 trillion. The US, of course, 23, 24 trillion. Now, for so much of humanity, you're talking about 1.4 billion people. You're talking about giving them proper job opportunities, making sure that they also experience the growth. Digital is going to play a very important role. So it's almost like a duty of the state to make sure that we bridge that digital divide and make sure that our population, especially people in the remote areas and the villages, the difference between India and Bharat, right? So not only people in the metro cities and the big cities, but also people in the remote areas where there is limited access to even roads and physical infra. I think digital can certainly be, has to be, focused on and make sure that these guys have access to, the internet access. What can the government do? I'm sure part of it they're already doing. It could be range from, making sure that there is a proper investment on, infrastructure in terms of fiber optic cables, broadband networks in the rural as well as, the urban areas. Making sure that mobile phones, of course, not only in India, but the world over, they remain a popular way to access, internet. So the government can work with, the operators, the mobile phone companies, making sure that, people have access to subsidized, phones and machines to make sure, computers, to make sure that, they have access to internet. The digital, by the way, is also a way for universities like us, to make sure that we contribute to that growth story, so that we can use our capabilities, which is essentially to upskill, a large section of the population. Because if you think about it, digital perhaps is the only way to make the education affordable, right? It not only makes geography, agnostic, it's also idea of where people can't afford education in the top ranked universities. Digital is the way to go forward about it. So I think when you talk about the India story about taking the economy from 3 to 5 to 10 to 15 trillion, making sure people have access to jobs, and that can also only come with growth. I think digital is going to play a very important role. And universities like us have an important role to play, that people have access to quality and affordable, education. In fact, if I think about, especially in a context like India, where although, this digital story has been a phenomenon, that, has been covered extensively in the media, there still, as you rightly pointed out, exists a large section of population that's, don't even have it. I mean, our per capita is about $2,200-$2,300. That's abysmal. I mean, compared to even China for that matter, which is at around, I think 12,000 odd. Not to mention US, which is upwards of $60,000, $70,000, dollars per capita. So there is a long route to travel. I think universities have an important role to play. And when you're talking about digital in a country like India, I also see a role of, medium like radio. Not only, mobile phones and computers, but radio to make sure that we can upskill, population for jobs that might come when the economy grows. Radio is a very popular medium in India, but, I'm not sure about other countries, but it still remains a very popular medium, especially in the rural areas. And I think, universities have a role to play that, they can upskill, a population which is from socially, disadvantaged background, and to make sure they're ready for the jobs of the future.
Thank you so much, Professor Dhaundiyal. So I have now 2 questions from the audience. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read those questions and perhaps have all the panelists sort of come in on any one of the question or the 2 questions. So the first question is, do you think an in-person classroom experience can really replicate online experience? Oh, sorry, I think it's the other way around. Do you think an online teaching experience can replicate an in-class person experience? As a faculty who taught during the pandemic, I am really skeptical about teaching online, and I don't think it can replicate human energy that we see in person. So that's the first question. And maybe we can have comments on that from everyone, and then I'll read out the second question for second set of comments, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think our experience in the UK has been that online learning certainly has its place, as we've heard from colleagues this morning, and it certainly suits mature independent learners. But I think also what COVID taught us is that, or rather reminded us, is that learning is a social activity, and we enjoy each other's company, and we prefer it when we're by and large in a room together, and we get more out of it because we are able to access more emotional cues from each other as human beings. So it has its place, and it will continue to have its place, but so does face-to-face. And these things will suit different people at different times in their lives, actually, I think. Can I just make one other point about what on the access to education? We have a partner in Africa, and we've had some of these experiences. And just a couple of things, actually, even where broadband is not readily available, even WhatsApp actually worked, if provided you're not sending 60 gigabit files down WhatsApp. But even if you're sending a few megabytes of learning materials, actually that often was enough, and that worked very, very well. Particularly where in parts of Africa where the energy supply was a bit unreliable and unpredictable. The other thing which I noticed that seems to be cropping up is the development of sort of pop-up learning hubs in local towns and cities. So if you as a homeowner either can't afford broadband, but you could get within a few miles of a learning hub where a private organization has brought together the old internet cafe, for want of a better phrase. That seemed to be, one, it was a place to go and be sociable and be around people where you can learn, but B, you're getting access to more reliable technology provision if that's not available readily in your own home. So I'll stop there.
I agree. If I can quickly just come in, just a 2-minute comment. I totally agree with Mike. I think they're two very different sort of, product offerings. And I think they both have their place. If you talk about online, essentially you're looking at affordability, you're looking at flexibility, In fact, a lot of our students who are doing these, programs, the online degree programs, they don't leave their jobs while doing these degree programs. It's just not possible in a residential program, right? So you're looking at a model where a person, let's say from Africa, is doing a degree program, without leaving her or his job. That's just not possible, in a residential program. So it's asynchronous content offering a lot of flexibility, affordability, accessibility. So I think these are two very different things, and with their own advantages.
Absolutely. Would Professor Kennedy, Professor Suparto, would you like to comment on this question?
Yeah, I'll just jump in if that's okay. And I think it's a really good question, about online versus in person. And there's a whole lot in that, let alone, we've heard about individuals' preferences or needs to fit around their life, their, the finance, the ability to engage with education. But if we just think about the quality, I think it depends. So I think online delivery has its place, and probably makes us think a little bit more about how and what we deliver on campus. So one of the things I've been thinking about quite a lot with our faculty is around lectures. The very traditional lecture can be delivered just about as well online. But online maybe isn't quite as good for the more practical, discursive, discussion-based teamwork, that kind of, more seminar, tutorial, practical type sessions. So it's maybe thinking about how we can blend that, and the very didactic stuff could be done online, and then that can then feed the discussion that we then do on campus, the question answers and so on. So I think there is a place for online. It's not the same experience as on campus, but for some, online is the better option because it fits around their lives. So that, I think that's my insight.
Thank you so much. Professor Suparto, your comment.
Well, my comment is to the question itself. Can online activity replicate the on-site one? Well, from your questions, Dipika, it looks that you take on-site activity is better than the online one. You already have that conclusion or assumption, whatever it is. Well, in my opinion, it makes sense. It makes sense that on-site activity for teaching learning activity nowadays is better than the online one. Why? It's simply a matter of time. We have been accustomed to doing on-site, face-to-face, hundreds of years, or 10 years, for example. While we have the experience of online activity, it just maybe 3 years, maybe. You cannot compare doing 3 years activity comparing to 40 years activity, for example. Logically, we must be well trained within 30 years activity rather than 3 years activity. Therefore, it really makes sense that online activity for the time being, I mentioned for the time being, is better than, cannot replicate dominantly about on-site activities. I agree with Mike that in on-site activity, we have more emotional attachment between the teacher and the students, for example. Yes, in fact, yes. It's difficult to replicate the degree of emotional attachment here doing on-site and then the online one. But later again, it is a matter of time in my assumption. Because we just had the full, let's say, full quotation mark, only 3 years of doing online. And then compared to 30 years of doing on-site, it's not comparable. But within 10 years, maybe, or maybe or 20 years, at least 10 years, online activity will be dominate our teaching learning activities. Although again, we cannot replicate. There are some activities that must be done on site, face to face. Yes, I agree. But for teaching learning activity, as long as we are not stuck on lower order of thinking for the students, then online activity can give more actually. Why some teachers, some lecturers think that technology disturb education because they are stuck on the lower order of thinking. As you might also be aware that as a teacher, we tend to teach as what we were taught. We were taught in 90s, we were taught in 2000, for example, then there's a tendency that a teacher will teach like what they were taught. Therefore, it is important for us as a teacher to have, as I mentioned here, to have, let's say, open mind, to leave our comfort zone. As me, for example, as digital immigrant, I have to leave my digital immigrant world to be in a digital native students like what we have now. So in conclusion, it is not comparable. It is not fair to compare between online activity, which is only 3 years, with on-site activity, which has been 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Suparto. I'm afraid we don't have time for more questions, though there were some questions. And I think one of the questions was actually to do with the conclusion, which is that what kind of capacity building measures are the university leaders taking in terms of just pedagogical capacity, because of the the nuances are so different in online teaching as vis-a-vis offline teaching. But thank you so much for this very engaging conversation. It was a pleasure to be having this conversation with you. Have a good day, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mayank.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dipika. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
It's an honor
Thank you.
to be
Bye-bye.
here. Thank you.